Morning. My name is Scott Forcino. I'm an associate broker with eXp Realty, New York City metro area. I founded PlugIntro for the sole purpose of allowing real estate agents and their colleagues to make new and better referral partners. With that comes a lot of education as to best practices in business networking and, of course, the real estate business itself. We have someone here today who's quite an expert in the new age of commercial real estate construction and rehabilitation. It's fellow eXp broker. It's Robert Politzer, a friend. So thank you for being here, Robert. Good morning.
Hey, Scott. Good morning. Great to be here with you.
Great to be here. We're on the dawn of a new age. So I'd love to hear more about, your background and what do you think is important going forward.
Sure. I love those questions. It's always, where do you begin, right? So why don't I start with, back in 1998 when I first started my Green Street company and began doing environmental remediation work at a pretty edgy, difficult time in New York City's history. I did a lot of lead paint abatement work because at that time there were a lot of lead poisoning cases, kids, and the lead abatement work. Ironically, I was an environmental engineer for some years with Warren and Panzer engineers. I was an adjunct professor, so I knew a lot of inspectors. And when you dive into a new venture, sometimes you got to just start swimming. And so they were sending me leads for Department of Health ordered lead abatement projects. So lead paint abatement projects, especially residential, are essentially renovation projects with some additional site preparation, some altered work practices, and much more, much greater fine cleaning, of course. So I did that for a while, and then in it was, I believe, 1999 or 2000, I first learned about green building, and I really fell in love with the whole concept, the whole notion of, and that was really sort of bringing together in the two main focuses of my professional life, which was construction and environmental issues, which, was typically considered to be completely disparate, right? It was, environmental issues were something that just kind of, showed up whenever you got a violation from an inspector, but otherwise most building owners try to just tuck it away and minimize the expense as much as possible. And so learned about green building, started to get involved with some renovation projects, looking to try to bring some green building strategies, products, services into the mix. This was well before there was LEED, the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED program. This was before there was any national certification program for green building projects. So this was really, I was really a pioneer. As far as I know, we had the first green building company in New York City. At that time, there was one supplier downtown in this little warehouse space, and that was it. So I then met a client, a wealthy client who was also a forward-thinking person down in Soho. He had a property on Green Street. And so that was the first green renovation project officially that we did. And being on Green Street, I changed the name of my company to Green Street. I really liked the balance between sort of, green environmentalism, but focused on, very foundational construction and real estate. Because to me, from the very start, I never looked at green building as some kind of hippie endeavor. To me, it was always just a smarter way to be building and renovating. And but it was a long, heavy lift because very few people shared my views back, especially then. So then LEED certification came along. The U.S. Green Building Council was founded. They formed their LEED certification program. I got LEED accredited. in 2003, which was also really pretty early, and then got involved as a lead consultant on some LEED certified projects. Most notably, I worked on the Mark Twain House Education and Visitor Center in Hartford, Connecticut. I was the lead consultant for that project. That was the first LEED certified museum in the country. And it was a very high profile project. You know, huge learning curve. So after that time, we got involved, my company got involved in, I believe, 5 additional LEED certified projects. We always tried to stay on the leading edge. We also got into doing some solar installations. We did the first grid-tied residential solar installation in New York City and Brooklyn for an architect. Always trying to stay on the leading edge. So we did a lot of high-end renovations, trying to be as green as possible. But I started to get more interested in commercial real estate, got my real estate license, and then met up with a colleague who I worked with for about 5 years on commercial real estate brokerage. And in the process, I naturally, me being who I am, I saw the opportunity, the need and opportunity for a smart building upgrade program for commercial buildings that much more so than single family residential buildings, commercial buildings can be significantly improved with a smart building upgrade if it's done right. So I worked for about 4 or 5 years on a program, got modest traction with it, started doing some small scale real estate development. I flipped. In the end, I ended up flipping 7 homes, 3 in Pennsylvania, 4 in Florida, invested in a multifamily property in Baltimore. So got some experience in that realm. And then in 2019, New York City Council passed the Climate Mobilization Act, which was a really huge deal. So the Climate Mobilization Act, which it was passed with the intention of bringing New York City real estate into compliance with the Paris Accord. The fundamental goals of the Paris Accord is to cut carbon emissions by 80%, carbon emissions 80% in total by 2050. That was the basic overarching goal. So as part of the Climate Mobilization Act, there are 5 different laws, local laws 92 and 94, which relate to rooftops. So if you're doing a major rooftop renovation, you have to install either solar panels after the renovation or a green roof on top of the membrane you put down, a grassy green roof system. That was 92 and 94. Local law 95 and 96 had to do with grade scoring and also establishing PACE financing, a certain kind of special kind of financing for these projects. But most importantly, Local Law 97 of the Climate Mobilization Act is by far the most impactful. I would argue that it's the most impactful building-related climate legislation in the world. So it starts officially in 2024, requires buildings, private buildings above 25,000 square feet to cut their carbon emissions by 40%, starting in 2024 to be completed in 2030. And then from 2030 to 2050, an additional 40% of carbon emissions are to be cut. Now, I get the question often, why the 2 phases? The first phase is really intended to be all about work on the building itself. And with the technologies we have available today, especially ironically for the poorer performing buildings, it's not that difficult to cut carbon emissions by 40%. So, and I'll get into our program in a moment and how we would do that. Starting in 2030 and beyond is when New York State is supposed to be in the process of implementing a clean power program for the state. So the idea is after 2030, these buildings will be able to be purchasing 100% clean power from the grid, which would help get them over that additional 40%. That's the way the whole law is structured, okay? But in the end of the day, 80% of carbon emissions are going to have to be cut. under this law. So now, in addition, this law has real regulatory teeth. The fines can be substantial. So the law is going to require annual reporting by a licensed engineer or architect. They're going to have to provide a report on the greenhouse gas emissions from a building every year, May 1st, starting in 2025, every year. Every one of these buildings that is covered, that needs to comply, is going to have to provide this report. If they delay their report for more than 2 months, a building owner will start to get fined 50 cents per square foot per month for additional delays. So a 100,000 square foot building is going to get fined $50,000 per month for the delay in releasing that report. If they submit a fraudulent report, anything that's inaccurate, it's a $500,000 fine. And then failure to lower carbon emissions to the lowered limits. First at 2024, there's a lowered limit, and then 2030, there's a further lowered limit. There will be a fine of $268 per metric ton per year. Some of these large buildings could be emitting thousands of extra metric tons of carbon. So collectively, these fines could be above $1 million annually for lack of compliance. So there's real teeth to this law. However, I like to make this point, and this to me is the super important point. So anybody involved in commercial real estate, in particular, much more than residential real estate, in commercial real estate, it all comes down to valuation, and valuations are determined by the net operating income. Unless you're selling a development site where you're selling it based on comps, right? You're going to be selling a cash flowing building based on the net operating income of the building and based on what a competitive cap rate is. So where do we come up with net operating income? Well, it's pretty simple. It is revenues, all of your gross revenues minus expenses, operating expenses. So of your operating expenses, of course, there's the four biggies, right? There's insurance, taxes, utilities, and of course then labor. Of the three, there are multitudes of ways to lower those costs. And when those costs get lowered, if the income stays the same and the costs get lowered, the net income increases. So by making a building more efficient, lowering its utility usage, lowering its operating expenses, and increasing its net operating income, that puts more money in the pocket of an owner every month while they own the building. And when they're ready to sell the building, it puts substantially more money in their pocket. So this then affords what we are referring to and what we're working together with eXp Commercial, and they're very unique in embracing this, is the concept of value add brokerage. So conventional commercial brokerage, a commercial building owner would sign a listing agreement with a brokerage. They would then provide all their financials, and in the financials would be what their current net operating income is. So then there might be a brief discussion with the seller about what an appropriate cap rate would be. It has to be a competitive cap rate, but that's usually not as much in the control of the owner as the net operating income is, right? So it's NOI over cap rate. So if we increase NOI, keep cap rate the same, we increase valuation. If we keep NOI at the same and we lower the cap rate, we increase the valuation. The best scenario is when we increase NOI and lower the cap rate, because that doubly increases the valuation. So, however, conventional commercial real estate brokerage almost never includes any kind of upgrade as part of the process. So if you go to an auto dealership and you want to buy a certified used vehicle, and the auto dealership just got in a loaner, right? A leased vehicle. they're going to send that car over to their mechanic shop to have it tuned up, washed, made, look nice and pretty, and to be running as well as possible. Then they're going to put it back on the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen in commercial real estate. We don't tune up our buildings before we sell them. And because of that, there's a huge lost opportunity, especially for sellers of properties. So rather, in our value add brokerage approach, we will include a smart building upgrade. We will lower the operating expenses, increase their net operating income, then put the building on the market at a higher valuation. And the beauty is that, yes, this could take a little bit longer, but every month while we're doing the energy efficiency upgrades, the operating expenses are going down. So the owner is saving money as we work on their program. That effectively would more than pay for any delays of a month or 2 or 3 that we would need to further upgrade the building.